Hello, viewers. We're here today with Judy Fraser. Judy Fraser is a spiritual psychotherapist and also author of several books, namely Second Aid. Is that right, Judy?
Yes.
Second Aid. Is there a Third Aid?
Uh, I'll let you know
Oh,
in a
you
few
let me know.
years' time.
Um, my name is Ash, and I host the channel on YouTube, Sacred Ash Productions. And today we're just going to have a little chat about the subject of, well, I think the question was, what activated your spirituality? And we're just going to have a little to and fro and see what comes out of it. And here we are.
So, what activated you, Ash?
Um, it's kind of difficult to answer that in as one being one event, but rather as kind of there's been several events, several waves, and several times that it's come up.
What was the first one you remember?
I think the first one I remember was as a kid. As a kid, both my parents had gone to work and left me on my own, which I hated. And I used to go through this routine of watching the children's programs, which were all very magical. And then it went more adult as the day went on. And then I remember looking out the window and hearing a couple of guys swearing at each other and really aggressively and shouting. And I really disliked it. And something said in me, there's something wrong here. There's something wrong with this picture. Why do we have to do that? Why do we have to have that aggression with each other? And there was like a question or a seeking. Even as a kid, I've got to go and find this thing. I've got whatever this thing is, not really understanding what it all meant, but I just knew then I was a seeker of sorts. I think that's when, one of the earliest times. I think also I've always been surrounded, but having been brought up in Mauritius, having parents, Asian parents, I've always been surrounded by some religion, some form of prayer, some form of practice. And even eventually when I went into martial arts and everything like that, I was surrounded by the philosophy, always a belief of some sorts in the supernatural, in something other than just the physical. And then I was fascinated by the whole thing about happiness and suffering. How can we get more happiness? How can we let go of the suffering, and how can we manage the pain? I was always fascinated about that, those aspects. So I think that's where a lot of my seeking and either self-development, but then the self-development turned more spiritual in later years, I guess, because of my experience with ayahuasca.
How did you get into that? What prompted you to
So
follow that route?
I was on the self-development program, and it was all about it was still about health, improving well-being, happiness, getting what you want in life. But then this particular teacher who had been going on the self-development, get what you want track, had obviously had an ayahuasca experience themselves, and they had veered off. They had almost completely starting to change their outlook and almost saying, sorry about that, but I'm starting to see something else here. And starting to talk about other dimensions, visions, intuition, higher intuition, divinity. So it was ringing bells about my previous kind of religious experiences, but in a new format, without a particular religion, but more about intuition, experiencing spirituality from within. And then I just got more and more interested. And then I think I was, by my 40th birthday, I said, right, that's going to be my birthday present. I'm going to do ayahuasca. And I just booked it up. And by some chance, there were these Amazonian shamans who were touring Europe, and they came over to Norfolk, and I went there and spent 6 nights with them, and had my head suitably blown off.
How difficult was it to stabilize after that?
It probably took another year of continuing to drink at lower levels to be able to come back and make sense of it all. The initial initiation was so hard, so intense, and massive. I mean, if I say it now and I joke about it, but I'm lucky I'm not in some asylum somewhere, to be honest. It was from my perspective, it was that intense, and I wouldn't have recommended it to anyone to have gone through that. But I would say, yeah, it took at least a year to stabilize, and by drinking more of it, in fact, and learning and receiving and using other techniques to come back. Yeah, and then eventually going and doing Kundalini yoga training, and then I got stronger in my body and more able to move with energies, and we're still going, yeah.
Do you find it difficult to relate to more ordinary things now?
Well, I wouldn't say difficult, but the interest. It's almost there's a slightly different perspective. That eagerness to go for it. That eagerness to, make that amount of money, or buy that car, or go for the house, or go for the kitchen. To work for status. That's kind of like a bit sort of dissolved, or become very fluid or gel-like, rather than before it was, oh, this must happen and this is what everyone does and we're going for that. Yeah, I think I've been finding it certainly difficult in terms of there's been a whole load of facing a lot of pain as well going on, that has come up. So there's been the moments of ecstasy, jubilation, divinity. Oh wow, we now have the answer. But then there's been landing back in the world pretty hard. You've got bills to pay, you've got to have somewhere to live, and things in your family will be happening and you'll be interacting with people in the world who don't have any idea that you have been going through this, or there is such a thing, and are purely talking on a very worldly, hard language, and I found that difficult. I found that at times difficult. But getting better the more and more I interact. But also being more sensitive now. So when people come in quite strong, you feel it harder. And there's, I think we've talked about this, there's almost, you kind of think you're going to have more friends, and everyone's going to go, oh, yes, hello, Ash, yes, we know you've gone through all of this, and well done, and da, 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 da. On the contrary, it's the other way around.
Well, they see you where you are now and can't think that you've had difficulty in getting there.
Yeah.
I totally empathise with that.
Yeah.
Because I came from a completely different angle.
Right.
Excuse me. I was in an orphanage and subsequently adopted. by quite a religious, well, my guardian's brother was a bishop in the Church of England. And it was kind of all, well, this is the way to do it. And I thought,
right, yeah.
Yeah, but you haven't got anywhere yet. Why are you talking like this? And I'd always been intuitive, but didn't know it. I thought everyone was. So I was very disappointed when I found out they weren't. So I desperately tried to fit in with their world, because clearly no one was going to fit in with mine. So I damped my intuitive ability down and learned not to talk about it and not to speak of it because it was so disapproved of. And it was only later when I had children of my own and they got very sick. Two of them had meningitis. One of them had it twice in 2 years. And they became very able at different levels of energy. And so I opened up again to try and help them stabilize.
Yeah.
And kind of realize that if you were going to evolve spiritually, it was nearly always through trauma, shock, or pain, because it was the only thing that gave you a big enough kick up the backside, I mean, not
Yeah.
any other kind of kick, to really concentrate your mind and to work from the inside out rather than from the outside in. And I'm always fascinated as we try to cross disciplines, because people get very structured. It's like my way is the only way. It's not. It's a way. And you know this because you've been filming the anti-dogma talks we've been doing.
That's right. Spirituality in real life. Yeah.
Really? Yeah, really. And why can't we learn from each other without necessarily having to go and live with each other?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I can remember my teacher saying to me, the more you develop spiritually, the more you're going to have to develop your character, i.e. tolerance, compassion, empathy. And how true is that? Not to mention a sense of humor.
Yeah. So I guess we're also trying to understand what is spirituality and what is being spiritual. What does that mean? And I guess maybe it means different things to different people.
Isn't it living to your optimum capacity rather than kind of always carry on trying? You know, the only sin is not to hope there's something better.
Yes. Yeah.
And to work towards it rather than... Yeah, I've seen it a lot just lately, actually, in people that they settle for their sort of perhaps selfish wants rather than looking at the deep need, not only of themselves, but of the people around them.
Yeah.
And it's like you were saying, you know, people aren't interested in how you got to where you are. They're just not.
Yeah.
And they want to arrive without doing the work. Well, it doesn't work that way as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Well, this is where, you know, I try and I look at some people and they go, oh, Ash is very spiritual. And then they see bits of the Kundalini yoga I do, and there's a devotional element as well as a very physical, using the breath, using mantra, using all these things. And they go, well, because there's a devotional side, they go, oh, that's religious. That's to do with a religion. But I don't believe in religion, or I don't want to believe in God, or maybe there is something, but I'm not a follower of that sort, and then they dismiss, therefore I'm not spiritual. But then, trying to define that actually spiritual perhaps is no longer in the realms of just people who are religious. That's being religious, that's following a religion, that's okay. But spiritual essentially means you're enlivened by spirit, by this energy that is within, and it has no necessarily any attachment to any man-made organized shape or form. It just is how it is, and depending on who you are, how you experience it. And there's this difference between, is there even supernatural outside of us? Is that necessary to believe in that to be spiritual? Because spiritual could mean I exhibit love to somebody, I exhibit compassion, I exhibit right doing, care, attention, all those positive aspects of a human. But I am being spiritual because I guess I'm coming from spirit, but I don't necessarily have to believe that there is anything supernatural. And then others will say, yes, there is the whole unseen supernatural.
I think you've only got to go out and look at the stars at night to think, well, I don't think I'm the only thing here.
Yeah.
I actually don't think I've settled for world domination. There seems to be an awful lot I don't understand.
Yeah.
And it's okay not to understand it, providing you're keen to learn. I mean, I think you can see that. You can see that in children who just have dead eyes. They're there, they're occupying the space, but they're just not interested in learning. For some reason, a veil has been brought down and they're dead behind their eyes. And then you can see old people who are still, they may be physically less capable, but they're still very animated. They're still very interested in what goes on under any and all circumstances.
Yeah.
And that's lovely.
Yes.
So maybe the animation, the spirit within, is what we optimize.
Yes. Yeah.
And embrace all disciplines. I mean, it fascinates me how people have come to be able to verbalize their spirituality or visualize it even.
Yeah.
Because they're actually saying there is more. Life is bigger than I am. And I want to learn about it as much as I can without being a royal pain to other people.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I think we all get fed up with being talked at least I do.
Yeah.
My boredom threshold goes right down. If someone gets very dogmatic and says, I am the way, the truth and the light, and you've got to do it like this, and you've got to do it like that, and you've got to do it like that, it automatically brings out the rebel in me.
Yes. Yeah.
But people who demonstrate a way and who look well and happy on it, that's a whole different kettle of fish, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And when we can cross-refer and move across boundaries that have been so rigid, then we'll all learn something.
Yeah.
Who knows what?
Yeah.
And that can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to come from religion. It can come from the arts. It can come from poetry. It can come from historical reference in architecture. It doesn't really matter where it comes from, providing it makes you more of who you are. And I think it's terribly difficult when people have a spiritual awakening, i.e. a growth spurt. It's like you, when you started to take ayahuasca. it's kind of like, well, hey, this is a bit of a culture shock.
Yeah.
How do I integrate that without being weird?
Yeah, completely going the other way. And
yeah, really.
Yeah.
So I think you need an anchor, and I think that's really interesting at the moment, because I think we're having to anchor to the earth more than we ever have before to enable us to fly.
Yes. Yeah.
Because otherwise we just fall around in a drunken state.
Yeah. And it's funny because, in yoga, when people are sitting there cross-legged and they're looking all spiritual, but that's the reason why their legs are crossed in that way, is to keep them, their bodies really grounded to the earth, whilst their higher centers can travel. And I was fascinated when I heard that. I went, of course, that makes absolute sense. It's not about looking perfect. It's about keeping you grounded.
Well, I've certainly noticed when I've had a growth spurt, I can fall about and look like I've been drinking.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I've lost. It's like, hey, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And it takes a little while to stabilize, particularly if you're totally incapable of sitting cross-legged as I am.
And of course it depends what environment you're in as well, because I found it's so easy to go through these phases of thinking. You have this whole sort of peak experience and you see visions and angels, and suddenly your whole attire changes. You start wearing multicolored clothing and feathers start appearing at the back and crystals in every corner of the room, and you're endlessly wafting incense, and you start believing what other people are saying. You hear whispers of, oh, there are spirits over there, there are good spirits, bad spirits, that spirit. But before, you weren't bothered about any of this. This has come afterwards through the cultural kind of attachments and wanting to believe, and oh, the holy shaman is over there and kiss his feet, and all of it sometimes is almost unnecessary. It really is just nothing.
I remember being very shocked. I worked in Canada quite a lot, and I wanted to know that it was approved of that I worked there. So I kind of sent out a prayer saying, if it's okay, please advise me. And I promptly met, at his instigation, a shaman. And I talked to him on the phone, and we then met. And I was really shocked because he was wearing jeans and a vest.
Right.
So I thought,
come on.
What's this? And we actually became great friends and worked together a lot.
Yeah.
And he is the real thing.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Not only is he very socially conscious.
Yeah.
And working to keep his culture and his people in a good state, but also, he would put out his hand and birds would just land on his hand.
Right.
And start eating seed.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like, can I do that?
No. Yeah. So I guess that brings us on to the subject of the proof of the pudding is in the taste kind of thing. It's when looking at shamans or teachers and stuff like that, it's about also have they lived it?
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting at the moment, because I think a lot of the people who have talked the talk but not walked the walk are beginning to fall away.
Right.
It fascinates me when you have these sort of festivals, which I must say I don't go to anymore. But when I used to go to them, you'd kind of, here this year, gone next.
Right.
And then there were one or two who just was still working years and years and years later. That's impressive, because it's the energy they carry more than what they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I've often wondered if you went to a spiritual event and talked about the merits of sliced bread and came away thinking, wow, that person's really impressive. You know, isn't that more what it's about?
Yeah.
The extraordinary coming through the ordinary.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of, you know, we've been accessing a lot of peak experiences through ayahuasca, through retreats. And so people have been seeing visions, have been feeling energies move through them. And then we want to hold on to those experiences and think, well, that's better than where we're at now, somehow. And so we're trying to get over there all the time. And then we're discarding the everyday life, the everyday being kind to each other, the everyday looking after our community, caring for one another, and more about I need to be in that realm or this realm. Or...
But the interesting thing is that when people do that, I mean, we get into semantics and language here, but I just heard of someone who had climbed a pyramid in a very ancient culture and spent the next few days throwing up and throwing down. And it's kind of like, look, you're not ready to go there yet.
To go there, yeah.
Now, couldn't you just walk around the site?
Right, yeah.
Did you have to climb?
Yeah.
You know, and I think people who try and run before they can walk will get into trouble. I mean, it's an area that I'm particularly interested in, because people who wake up through accidents and illness, who weren't looking for it at all, it just happens.
Yeah.
If they can integrate it with their everyday life and the people who surround them, it will be great in the fullness of time. But if they sort of go off at tangents, and like you say, sprout feathers and start calling themselves by weird names and leaving their families to enable their progress without thinking of the chaos they leave behind,
which is
I don't
so
believe
common.
Yeah, I don't believe that's okay.
Yeah, which is so common. You hear it on the ayahuasca circuit, for example, and people have, you know, they just turn up, never had it before, have it suddenly. Oh yes, I came to the realization I've got to leave my wife and kids. Oh, hold on. How did that happen? It's almost like I found this freedom, so therefore I'm just going to let go of all responsibility. Yeah, so it's very, 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 very common.
I think that puts a huge onus on teachers.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, they have to be discouraged from that. I mean, we're going back years and years and years now. When my kids were ill, one of them could just look at you and you knew what he wanted. And the others would say, oh, you want some orange juice? I'll get it for you. And the hardest thing was to stop the other children responding without him stuttering and stumbling and asking.
Yeah.
So I think that the teachers who enable people easily to create chaos in their lives need to be very strongly discouraged.
Right.
Because you're going to move forward at the rate of the slowest within your group, not run with the fastest and leave everyone behind. You know, going back to North American Indian culture, the scout would go out and look for a food source or a place to stay the night, but then would have to wait for everyone else to catch up. I'm sure they got very impatient and very irritated by the length of time it took for everyone else to join them. But that was the job. Well, I think that's true of spiritual teaching.
Yes, yeah.
I think we go to a point, the next point, not the ultimate destination.
Yeah.
And then you wait for the others who surround you to catch up before you're free to go on again.
Yeah. So in a way, it's each stage, if there is such a thing, stages of awakening or stages of opening. It doesn't mean just because once you've gone through it that it's automatically all okay and safe on the next one. It's like we've said, there's an even stronger amount of untamed ego or ego you haven't looked at yet that's waiting there going, ta-da, I'm here too.
Yeah, and pride and ambition and all those less desirable things.
And serious lack of humility.
Really. And the intensity, have you noticed that?
Yeah.
When people start to develop, they become so intense and so miserable.
Yeah.
And you think, well, if that's being taught in the name of healing, I'd rather keep the disease.
Yeah. And then there's kind of well, once upon a time, things that I thought, weren't the best things to be doing. But because now I've reached a certain stage, well, I can rationalize it. I can justify. It's okay for me to do these things behind the scenes, rather than take the hard way, which is being more disciplined, watching those addictions, not diving into the old patterns, and because of your increased awareness, using almost your intellect to justify old behaviors and rationalize the hell out of them.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because so many things can be excused through intellect.
Yeah.
And you can read all the books and listen to all the great teachers and all the rest of it, and then find a way to excuse yourself emotionally because you've actually never felt the agony and the ecstasy. So your point of reference is either or.
Gotcha.
There's no middle point. And I can remember one of my teachers saying to me, don't look on growth as from here to there, by all means.
Right.
But be able to be in either place. It's like be here or be there. No, try and integrate them to a middle point and use that as your next foundation to move on again. So don't try and be perfect overnight, because it's only you deciding what perfect is.
Yeah.
In transactional analysis, they're called self-drivers.
Okay.
Like be perfect, try hard,
Yeah.
etc. Well, perhaps we're better off not to assume anything. Because life has a happy way of moving us on when it's required.
Yeah. There is that. What that brings up for me is that idea of surrendering into the unknown.
Well, don't we have to at every stage of growth?
Yeah, and I think I've found that even almost harder, because the more you learn, the more you hear from other teachers, the more you understand these concepts, then you're packing heavy.
Yeah.
So the next moment when that happens, you try and give it a great big reason, and often that's just distraction, complicated it, making it up, and rather than where originally you may have just gone, here we
Absolutely. I think we get at each stage we probably get a little bit arrogant
Mm.
and think, oh, well, now I know. And modesty and humility just fly out the nearest window until the next time. But the next time will be even harder because you thought you knew and now you're finding out you don't.
Yeah.
You might know a bit, but not much.
Yeah, and this is again the whole internet culture, because you can do so much on your own now. But is it good enough to just do it on your own, or do you really need to be seen as well? Seen by either a teacher, some sort of guide, mentor, peers, in order to kind of help you?
Well, just because you're seen by them doesn't necessarily mean you'll take any notice of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of happening at the moment, is that people are given a chance. They're given a mentor or a spiritual friend or whatever you like for so long. And if they choose to justify their status actually for selfish motivation, at a certain time, that friend or mentor will be removed. It's like, okay, you're on your own till you realize that what you're doing is not for the good of all. It's to please yourself.
Got you. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that that's right,
Yeah.
but it seems logical to me.
Yeah.
Which is also interesting because it means that the teacher or the mentor or whatever has got to realize, well, it's kind of like, I can only equate it to kids. It's like when kids leave home, they're absolutely convinced they know it all. And then they find out they don't.
Yeah.
And they may get help from their friends, or they may actually reintroduce themselves to the parents because they want their washing done or whatever it is. And it's kind of like, well, perhaps I don't know it quite all. You know, and I think that's the same with spiritual growth. It is, if you think you know it all, well, go out and find out you don't. Because actually, eventually, you'll creep back, not necessarily to the people that worked with you before, but to someone else. But while you think you know exactly what's required for all concerned, especially you, go ahead.
Right, yeah.
I don't think you can help anyone who's not ready to take your hands.
Yes. And so that says to me, it like in, you know, the old Eastern way is the old-fashioned teacher. There was a lot of telling off, and there was even the odd hit with a cane, and in fact that was almost a blessing that you were getting hit by the cane.
Thank you for taking notice of me.
Exactly. Yeah, he hit me. But then I think in the West we don't react well to that. And so we almost need coercing. We need, oh, please come, and and there almost is this a little bit of, you know, you see it in all the kind of modern yoga classes. There's a lot of, the teacher is kind of like, oh, please come, and you are amazing, and you are wonderful, and you are this, and you are that, and rather than the stern kind of teacher that looks at you and goes, you're being a little shit right now.
Well, I think there's a middle way.
Right.
I think
okay.
you can, you can sort of get to a point where you say, please yourself whether you come or not.
Yes.
Because I think it says more about the teacher if they start to beg students.
Yeah.
It's more about them saying, I am the teacher, you are the students.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the way either. I think it's an overcompensation to this sort of the punitive regime.
Yeah, got you. Yeah. So they've gone the other extreme. Yeah.
Well, I think so. And also, everyone has something to offer.
Mm.
You know, we wouldn't be doing this now if it wasn't for your technical skill, because I certainly wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so we both bring something to the party.
The party. So it's
and hopefully that's useful to other people. If it is, great. If it's not, never mind.
Yeah. 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 So we've hit the 40-minute mark. In conclusion, if there was any advice that we could give anybody who's going through a spiritual experience, or who is looking into spirituality, or wants any form of guidance, what could we possibly say?
Make haste slowly. Don't run away with yourself.
Yeah.
Use your normal life as the way marker. So get it all together as best you can, getting help from the people you know, but also maybe specialists.
Yes.
Until you feel relatively comfortable in your skin, and then move on again. What would you say?
Yeah. Somehow try and keep a level head, keep grounded, bring yourself back into your body, do things that are very physical, dance, exercise, eat well, sleep well, all the usual things. Just remember, the peak experiences don't just mean you've made it and you're done. That everything that goes up is going to be coming down to reach a kind of leveling point. Just be aware of that. Importance of support, a little network of support. I think having one or two mentors is important. And people who have already been through the stages you've been, and more times they'll be closer to you than you think. They won't have to be the big names and that you have to run after. They'll be closer to home than you think.
And with a proven track record.
Proven track record, yeah, that's right. Because it is also so easy to follow people up the garden path too. Yeah. And, there we are.
Well, thank you, Ash.
Oh, well, thank you, Judy. And as a reminder, your website is judyfraser.com, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Where they can get more information about what you do and the books that you've written, such as Second Aid. And of course, for more free videos, you can come to Sacred Ash Productions on YouTube. My name is Ash Yogi. Thank you very much, Judy.
Thank you.
Until the next time. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.